So for this part of the hammer here, we're going to have to experiment a little bit, but if we just take this shape apart, one thing that you'll notice is that the base is more or less cylindrical, and the cylinder kind of works its way up and just kind of grows upwards until, of course, it kind of reaches a flat base here, like that. Now it is somewhat, still, I guess, a little bit cylindrical across here, sorta, but not completely. So let's go ahead and create this shape. So first of all, I'm just going to go ahead and just start off with the cylindrical base. So let's go ahead and go into this tool. So I'm going to go back into my mesh tool here, and I'm going to go ahead and just select this with a polygon and make sure that your wireframe is on. So again, this button here, shade, wireframe colored. And let's go ahead and just select that and bevel up. So I'm going to first of all just bevel outwards like that. Not too much, just a little. I'm going to middle click, bring this in, and up. And of course, when I go up, what I could do is I could go up once, scale it up a little bit, do that again, and just keep doing it up until you reach just about here. Now, for now, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure that this bevel here, when I beveled upwards, meets this line more or less. Now, I will also want to make sure that when I use, basically I'm going to select some of the previous edge loops. I'm also going to want to more or less line up with these lines. Now, why am I wanting to do that? Well, the reason why I want to do that is because later on, I am going to be merging this part of the hammer with this part. And when I go ahead and just, when I merge it right along the part where it intersects, I'm going to want to make sure that these lines are, more or less touching. So I can go ahead and just make a split from here to here, and I'm going to have some line of connection. So, okay, so we have that. Let's go ahead and just continue upwards. Now this time I'm just going up only. And I go into a side view and I make sure that once again I am beveling up, but only up. And I want to make sure that these lines are more or less aligned with these ones here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and just middle click, move up slightly, middle click, move up slightly, and middle click and move up slightly. Now, what I will be able to do a little bit later is I will be able to just go ahead and just use this slice tool. But for now, or not the slice, but I can use the scale tool later on to kind of align everything all together. All right, so we have the head, we have this portion here. You know what I could do? I could probably just go ahead and just select all of this handle, and I can go ahead and just deselect a small portion of this model. And of course, the reason why I want to deselect for now is because I'm going to want to detach this portion from the rest of the handle. And towards the end of the tutorial, I will go ahead and just merge it right back. So I'm just going to go ahead and just Control X or Edit Cut. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a new mesh and go to Control V to paste my results so far. Okay. So next up, I'm going to want to create this stuff over here. These little teeth. Well, the way I'm going to do that is, first of all, if you notice, the tips here are more or less flat. And of course, when I extrude outwards, I'm going to want to make sure that I extrude from a flat surface, because if I go ahead and do something like this, and I use the bevel tool or extrude, I'm going to extrude along the angles outwards like this. That's not what I want. Now, should I do the same thing, but if I scale first, like this, I go ahead and just scale down to 0%, and then I just move this outwards just slightly like that, then what I will be able to do is now if I go ahead and just do that, and go ahead and bevel, you'll notice that now I am beveling outwards in the direction that I want. Okay, so now that we know that, First of all, I'm just going to test something out here. And it looks like something has gone. I've made a slight boo-boo here. Bit of a mistake. I'm wondering if one of my bevels has gone wrong. Now, as you can see, if I just go ahead and just select... Now, this is something that you should also watch out for. Sometimes Modo will create some extra geometry where I don't want it. Sometimes you might go ahead and just execute a tool like bevel and just leave it where it is. And of course, if I now scale it, you'll notice that, well, I'm scaling. Why is this behaving like an extrusion? Well, sometimes you'll just make these mistakes when you're going fast. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to optimize this surface, and of course I'm just going to first of all check out if there's any problems. So I'm going to go ahead and just select a portion of the model here, so just this one polygon. Then I'm going to press and hold shift and press up. And right away you start noticing that there is something wrong here. Not only is this looking wrong, and I think that's because I used the bevel tool and I extruded outwards, and I think I used it twice or something like that. And you know, when I undid, I only undid the first extrusion but not the second, or the second extrusion but not the first. So in this case, I grew my polygon selection outwards, and you notice that these polygons were not selected. Well, the reason why they're not selected is because there's more geometry there. If I go ahead and just select one of these polygons, or any one of them, and just use the move tool, you'll notice that I can in fact extrude outwards. So again, the reason why that happens is because if I go ahead and just select these polygons here, and then use the bevel tool, but not bevel anywhere, and just drop the tool, you know, the surface looks more or less the same. But now if I go ahead and just use tab, you'll notice that the wireframe looks a little bit different. And again, if I select this, just, you know, right click across and go to W and just move, you'll notice that, well, it's not moving, it's extruding. If I go ahead and just use this here, and if I move, you'll notice that it's actually moving those polygons that I selected. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm just going to double click on this, and I'm going to very easily just go to the vertex, merge, and then just left click and drag to the left to make sure that the distance is 0. And you will now notice that there was a bunch of geometry that has disappeared. Well, the reason why it's again deselected is because what's happening is it's merging those polygons, and whatever it has merged, it will deselect that portion of the model. Okay, that's perfect. So next up, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just select some of this geometry here. And I'm going to bring it closer to here. At the same time, I'm also going to select these edges here. I'm just going to want to make sure that I scale this down to 0. And of course, this portion of the model as well. So again, let's just scale down to 0 on the X. Now, you might be modeling on a different axis altogether, so considering that I don't know which axis you're modeling on, I can't make that assumption, but right now I'm modeling on X, or X's front and back. Okay, so we have something like this. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and just move these a little bit closer. Now, why am I moving these away? Well, if you look at here, you'll notice that this portion of the model, it's fairly close. You have this small tooth here, you have more geometry here, and then as we move down, it starts moving towards that section right there. It just starts moving away and blending into the overall hammerhead. So that's exactly what I did here. So let's go ahead and just select these edges here. And let's extrude outwards or bevel. So I'm just going to go ahead and just go back into bevel tools. So again, polygon bevel, or just use the hotkey, whatever you made. In my case, I just use the E and left click, but again, that's not the standard hotkey, so that's the one reason why I haven't really been mentioning it. So once, twice, 3, 4, 5. And you know what? And I think that's more or less fine. What I can do now is I can just go ahead and just select this entire section, and I can scale it outwards. But the way I'm going to scale it first is I'm just going to go ahead and just go to Action Center. I'm going to choose, I could just use Element. When I choose element, I'm going to select one of these polygons here. Doesn't matter which one. And all I want to do is I just want to, actually no, you know what, I probably should choose this edge here. Now, one thing you'll notice is that when I chose this edge here, the handle is somewhat displaced or somewhat rotated, and it's not rotated in the way I want. The way I want it to be rotated is rotated to the world, which X is running directly along this line here. So of course I could do that by going to Action Center. I could just use center. Well, not center. I'm just going to go back in here. I can choose Axis Auto, and it will. Okay, you know what? Let me just go to Center, Element, and Axis Auto. And now whatever I pick, it will always be aligned to the world. So I'm just going to pick this edge here, and now I'm just going to go ahead and just stretch outwards directly from that point. So I know for a fact that because I selected this edge, I know for a fact that all this entire section here will not move when I scale outwards like that. Okay. So next up, what we need is, if we look at my original hammer here, you'll notice that the tip is much smaller, and of course the base is much bigger. So what we need to do, first of all, is we need to move these points up so that the tip is much tighter than the rest of the model. So let's go ahead and just go into one of our side views. And in this case, I'm just into my back view here. I'm going to go ahead and just select this geometry here, because this is the only portion of the model I want to affect. I'm going to go to Fall Off, Linear. I'm going to drag from here to here. And now what I could do is I could just go ahead and just use the Move tool to move like that, but there is one slight problem. All of it is moving. So what I could do is I could just use a different kind of, I could just use a different fall off altogether. So I can just change it up to cylinder. I could move it like that and try to move it again. And now you see that this is a little better. It's not perfect, but again, it's better. Now, the one problem I have right now is that, these lines aren't falling off in a linear fashion. Not a problem, because in the end, I'm going to take this entire edge loop here. If I go back to edges, I'm going to take this edge loop and I'm actually going to scale it until it's perfectly flat, and I'm going to do the same thing with this. But anyways, for now, this is moving upwards, so let's just keep going with that. Like that. And for now, this is fine. So let's go ahead and just select this top portion of this model. Just only the top faces. Let's go ahead and just, you know what? But before I do that, let's go ahead and just remove the fall off. So just go to fall off, none. Okay, so let's select all this. And what we're going to do next is we're just going to make sure that the entire top is not like this, but it's completely flat. So I'm going to go back into my scale tool. And you know what? I probably should make sure that before I use my scale tool, just make sure your action center is set to automatic. I'm just going to scale it until, of course, you notice that, if I go ahead and just use the scale tool, the Y is shrinking, so I'm just going to set it to 0. And now I can go ahead and just move it upwards. And now I know for a fact that this is perfectly straight. Now this is important because when I go ahead and bend it, I know that I'm going to get a straight bend from here all the way down to here. Of course, at the same time, I probably should pick this edge loop here, and I should scale this one as well, as much as possible. And of course, this is important as well, that I scale this one just the same, that this is actually all perfectly linear. And the reason, of course, is because, again, once I get this bend going in here, I want to make sure that if the edges are the same distance from here all the way along here, then what's going to happen is I'm going to get a very clean edge that doesn't vary in its curvature. These bottom edges here, Really doesn't matter how far they are away from anything else. I'm just going to be using them to kind of model some of the curvature in here and in here, but that's mostly just the bottom, just the very bottom edges. So for now, this is looking okay. And you know what? At this point in time, what I could do is I could just go ahead and just split this model in half and only worry about one portion of the model. So instead of having one tooth and a second tooth like this, I could just go ahead and just work only in one portion and just delete the other half. But it doesn't really matter if I do or not, but let's go ahead and try. So I'm just going to go ahead and just use edge slice. I'm just going to slice along here. I will, however, also do, actually, I guess I don't need to do it for the bottom because I disconnected it already. So I can just go ahead and just go into my polygon mode here, my polygon selection. And you know what, let me just select the other one, the other side instead. Like that. So now we see that I have selected, in fact, the entire half. Let's go ahead and just press delete. And we have only one section. And of course, this is important now. Well, not important, but I mean, this is useful now because I can just go ahead and just change one side of the model and not have to worry about the other. So if I want to see the other side of the model, I can always go to duplicate. And then if I press Alt, you'll notice that my duplicate options are changing. So let's go ahead and just go to instance mirror. Let's go ahead and click somewhere in the viewport. And of course, I mirrored along the wrong axis. So let's go ahead and just change it to the correct axis. In this case, it's Z. And let's just go ahead and just move it until it snaps. So now that we have a snapped result, I can go ahead and just move, play around with some of my edges. Make sure I'm once again in automatic action center. So move. And now you'll notice that I am in fact affecting both sides of the model. Perfect. Just like that. Now, this portion here, I'm actually going to want to scale even further. Let's go ahead and just move that a little bit closer. I'm going to move this also closer and just scale it down until the entire corner just seems a little bit sharper. I'm also going to want to do that from the side. Now here's the reason why I only added 1, 2, 3, 4 cross sections between this point. And the reason, of course, the reason why I did that is because I can very easily, just scale and move things manually, and I can still more or less get a linear transition from a model. Or what I could do is I could move this a little bit more, and then I could just kind of give it a somewhat of a curvature that I want. So if I wanted to move this downwards like that, I could kind of introduce a nice bend this way. And of course, I could always just go ahead and just, manually move some of this on my own. And it's perfectly valid to move stuff on your own as well. There's nothing that that says that you have to you just have to use these deformed tools and completely stick to them. Because I mean, when we go ahead and just use these smooth tools, in the end, the model will be smooth internally within Modo anyways. So I'm just going to get an extra level of smooth. Now granted, you are going to get a much cleaner smooth if you just use the tools internally, like the fall offs and whatnot, and just follow them a little closer. But in the end, it really, it's not the only way to work. Now, if I want to make sure that this entire edge here is perfectly flat, if you notice this tool here, my original hammer, this is perfectly flat across here, then what I could do is I could just go ahead and just select these polygons here that I want flat, only the polygons that I want to be flattened. And no others. So something like this. And just go into my scale tool. And of course, this time I'm going to want to make sure that I scale from here, because I do not want to affect this edge right here. I want to make sure that I snap all these polygons to this over here. So once again, I'm going to go into my action centers, center, element, axis, auto. And of course, I'm just going to hover over with my mouse over to here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and just scale along the Z axis like that. And now, as you can see, I have a perfectly flat side. And that's exactly what I was looking for. And you know what? I guess I could have probably done the same thing here. You know what? Let me just move that over like that. It's probably close enough. Okay, so we have something like this. Now it's time for me to go ahead and just add the curvature that I was looking for. So let's go into one of my back views. So back like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and just go into deform. I'm going to go to the bend tool. I'm going to place it over here. And of course, automatically Modo figures out that, you know, this is the end point here. And now I'm just going to go ahead and just use the bend tool like that. So now we have our hammer like this, and if I go ahead and just subdivide it now, and I look at the end result, I get something like this. Now this doesn't mean that I'm finished yet, because, you know, I'm not, but we have the general shape finished. So next up, I'm going to go ahead and just optimize this model. So I'm going to start, I'm just going to start adding more details. I'm going to merge this portion here, and just again finalize the model, just optimize and clean up and merge.